All right, we are live and active back with another episode of the Entity Framework Community Standup. My name is Jeremy Likness. I am here with Arthur.
Hi.
Say hi, Arthur. Shy.
Hello, everybody.
And of course, our special guest, Hassan.
Hello.
And we are actually going to dive right into it today. I don't think we have too many updates, so we're going to jump into Oh Data. I'm sure that we can use most of the hour talking about it. Very popular topic. So Hassan, why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about what you do at Microsoft, and then let's jump into Oh Data.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for inviting me in today. My name is Hassan Habib. I'm a senior engineering manager at Microsoft. These days, I'm basically, building the infrastructure and the internal financial systems for Microsoft, mainly payee systems. And, I get a chance to work with a lot of different teams within Microsoft to see how we incorporate Microsoft technologies within our own internal core services, something that we call running Microsoft on Microsoft. So we use our own technologies and try to leverage these technologies and see how far we can take it, and hopefully find any issues along the way that we can use to improve our product.
That's awesome. We started talking about OData, I think, actually a few years ago. And I know one of the reasons why I learned a lot from you is because you're actually using it. So it's lessons learned in the field, not a few demo apps on the side, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, so tell us about OData. What is OData? Why would anyone be interested in it? How does it tie into data in .NET?
Absolutely. So I'm going to step back a little bit just to give people a little bit of high level, how did OData come to be really as a standard, right? Today, OData, stands for Open Data Protocol, and it is a standard, and you need standards in the industry in order for you to be able to have the kind of flexibility between multiple partners and multiple applications, while giving them still the liberty to be able to use whatever technologies they want to use. So I'm going to go ahead in here and share my screen just to visualize things for people a little bit. I'm a little bit of a visual person, and I'm going to try to visualize things here for everybody, so we understand why OData was needed, and where is it headed, and all that kind of good stuff. So so let's just go ahead in here. I'm going to share my little Draw.io app here. And I'm just going to draw a little picture. Let's just assume that you have multiple partners, right? So let's say you have Microsoft in here. Let's say you have company X in here. And then you have company Y in here. Let it be, an IBM or an Oracle, whatever company is out there, it doesn't matter, right? And then all of these companies, each and every one of them have their own technologies that they like to use. Let's say Microsoft, for instance, loves C# and ASP.NET. Maybe some other companies like Java or JavaScript, whatever technology is out there. At some point in time, in order to execute a successful integration between these systems, these different systems, you want to kind of create what we call a standard, a protocol that allows these different components that are implementing their own technologies to talk to each other. So at some point in time, let's say Microsoft wants to talk to X service and Z service, but Z also wants to talk to Y, and Y wants to talk to X. But each and every one of them have their own technology, so they're not going to be able to understand each other in terms of the binaries and the bits that you're trying to put out there. So when this happens, what people do is that they go and they try to create a standard or a protocol for communication. And this standard and protocol for communication, every company will use its own diagram. It will use its own technology to be able to implement something against that standard. So think of a standard like an interface. It's just a contract, and you can implement it however you want. And then each and every company will take that standard and implement it in their own way. Sometimes they add a little bit of flavor on top of it. Sometimes they just say, nope, we're going to stick to the standard. We're going to implement exactly what we have. Back in 2007, Microsoft proposed a something that's called the Open Data Protocol Standard. That's all the way back in 2007. And they basically said, hey, we want to open a protocol. We want to create a protocol that allows all these different companies. We can see the rise of the, stateless communication, API communication, and we want to allow everybody to kind of come together and agree on a standard, where they can communicate with each other, because that's how you execute a successful business. Nobody does everything good all the time. So there's always a different company that offers SMS messaging services or email services, whatever the case may be. And you want all of these people to kind of adhere to that standard, just like your HTTP protocol. So Microsoft proposed, OData, and then it got adapted by the OASIS, committee. I don't remember OASIS off the top of my head, but it basically means Organization for the Advancement of Structured Information Standards, something like SHIELD. So what this basically means, so
we're really hyping up OData here.
Yeah, we're going full on. So basically, it got adopted, and then a lot of companies around the world, started to jump on that bandwagon, and they said, okay, we want to adapt to that because that's going to be the enterprise de facto when it comes to communication. So you have, companies like Oracle, SAP, back then, Sun Microsystems, and even the World Health Organization today, all their APIs that they're offering is OData enabled. There's tremendous amount, not just inside Microsoft, but around the world, they're offering the same capabilities with OData protocols. So now that you understand, like, this is a protocol and it's a standard that's adopted by a whole lot of companies, right? Microsoft started to create also their own version of it, their own implementation. And this is where, we come in to kind of advocate for this technology. It gives you that kind of power, to kind of query and filter and structure the data. Someone might ask me the question, so like, why do I need OData? I already have, like, assume for instance that you have an API endpoint like this. And your API endpoint is, let's say, API/students, I don't know, and you're passing in a student ID in there. Like this. Someone might say, what else can I possibly need? I already have my CRUD operations. I can retrieve, I can update, I can delete, I can do whatever I want. What else can I possibly need on top of that? Well, there's a whole lot of things that you could possibly need on top of that could actually make your life a lot easier as an engineer. So let's say, for instance, you have a client that's telling you, I don't want to search by the student ID. I actually want to go ahead and I want to search by a student name. So I want to pass in here a student name as a parameter into your API. And I want you to offer me this capability. Today, cost-wise and time-wise, if you go to a bunch of engineers and you tell them, hey, go ahead and implement an entirely new API endpoint that allows people to search with a student name, they're going to take a little bit of time. I know that building APIs today is super easy, but it's still, you need time to build it. You need time for the infrastructure. You need time for end-to-end testing. And you also need to populate and document that and then educate your partners about the new models and all that. Let's say your partners, for instance, is saying, I want to search by the student name, but I don't want the entire blob of a student model that you return. I just want their score and their names. I don't want anything else. You guys might have seen, like, in most of the popular APIs, industrial APIs that are out there, you might find a model that has 20, 30 attributes on it. I don't want all the 20, 30 attributes. It just puts up a little bit of an overhead over the wire, and I have to transfer that, and it has latency issues, and then you have to filter that on your side. It's just a lot of work that doesn't need to happen, right? I remember, Jeremy, like 2.5 years ago, when I was giving you an example, I was saying it doesn't make sense to go buy the entirety of Costco and then bring it back home and then pick up only the stuff that we need. It just doesn't make sense, right? You go to Costco and you pick up what you need and you come back home, right? It's costly. It's costly in the real world, and it's also costly from an API perspective. And what that basically means is that what a lot of people would do today, without OData, without any querying protocol, is that if you have a UI client in here, so let's say you have this UI client right here, and you have a server, and this server is just a dummy server that just gives you data. It doesn't do anything else. It's just an API in here. What some people would do today is that they would go and pull all the data and then do the filtering on the UI. And that means like in an enterprise, large application, if you have some 500 million records, good luck trying to do something like that. It becomes a really, really hard thing to process and work with. Instead, we add the OData plugin on top of this, and we go and say, okay, instead of doing all that, why don't you just add in the query that you want to pass in to us, and let me execute that query on the server, so you don't have to actually run that query again. And of course, on a SQL server, like if you're using the entity framework or a framework, an ORM of any type that basically handles the conversion between your programming language code and your SQL code or query code, anything that does that will execute that on the server, where it's much more optimized. It knows how to search for things instead of materializing all that data for you, saving it in memory, and then sending it over the wire where you have to filter that data and work with it. So that's basically just a little bit of an overview of what OData is trying to do. It's an optimization pattern. It's a simplification pattern. It's really cost effective when it comes to offering capabilities. It also is like the team, our OData team, when they thought about implementing the capability, they basically thought a lot about security, right? I want to disable some capability. I don't want you to be able to filter some. I don't want you to have the filtering capability. I don't want you to have the query capability in terms of ordering, for instance. Whatever capability you want to control, and it's so good because it allows you to go to a granular level where you can do the filtering and control what happens down to the controller method level. So endpoint by endpoint, you can control what's possible and what's not, or you can put something out there that would basically allow everybody to have all the capabilities all the time. So
we have a philosophical question, if I can interrupt your flow for a second.
Yep. Go ahead.
Is OData restful?
Yes, OData is restful. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of implementing OData, actually. Like, back in the ye olden days, there was other protocols like WCF, and and SOAP, and stuff like that. That basically what? Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah. So yes, and
he was just cheering for SOAP. WCF, yeah.
Yes.
I've got a bookshelf full of SOAP books. I need to use them sometime, don't I? No.
Paperweights.
Yeah.
That's right. So yeah, that's the whole point of it. We wanted to, like, when Microsoft proposed this back then, in 2007, they basically proposed it only for the purpose of having a RESTful, stateless, protocol that allows, multiple applications that are implemented in different technologies to communicate with each other seamlessly without any issues. Think of it as an interface or a contract. Absolutely 100%.
So back in the 2000, I joined Microsoft in 2008 to work on Entity Framework, and back in those days, EF and what was it called? WCF Data Services, which was kind of the first kind of OData like thing, were all kind of based around this EDM model, the entity data model. So OData, in my mind, is really what came out of that EDM that's still there and still useful. EF6 is also based on EDM internally. EF Core, one of the main differences, it's not based on EDM internally because for an ORM, it doesn't make as much sense as it does for when you're interoperating between different companies and stuff. But all that EDM stuff that came from Entity Framework and WS Data Service kind of evolved into this OData, and it's really cool to see where it's come and how it's really useful for modern day things, even though it kind of started off like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as you can see, like for everybody really on this channel, you guys must have seen how things are evolving, towards a more simplified, like things today, like for the people that are, hearing about OData for the first time, OData has gone through so many different iterations to be where it is today. And today I'm also going to give you a little bit of a glimpse of the future, because I've already started a small project called OData Next, and I'm working with the OData team to kind of, implement 3 new concepts in OData that's, it's going to blow your minds. You're going to love it. There's a lot of new things in there that like I already see people in the channel asking about some things around OData next, and I think they're going to be really, really pleased and really, really happy to see what the future of OData is. So if there aren't any more questions, I can go with a little demo. What do you think?
Let's take just a quick digression, because I'm interested too. The thing that you were using to diagram there, what was that? Like, let us all know.
Oh, this is my favorite tool in this whole world. It's called Draw.io. It's simple, it's easy, it just works. It's like it I don't know, somehow, someone introduced me to this tool, and I started to play around with it, and I'll be honest with you, like now all my actual day-to-day work is based on diagramming over Draw.io. It's an amazing tool. It's thin and simple, and it just works. And you can save the outcome of it in an SVG file that if you publish it to a GitHub repo, people could just view it on the fly. They don't have to install, an application or anything at all. Everything that I'm putting right now is turning underneath into code, SVG code that can be modified. And it's an amazing tool. It just works, and it's also in dark mode, which helps my eyes a lot. So so it's good.
Very cool. Love
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go back to OData.
All right. So, all right. Anything else? Any more questions before we jump into a quick demo? You want to show people a quick demo? OData got a
let's do
lot.
that.
Awesome. OData got so much simpler than yes, I see someone in the chat saying Draw.io has VS Code extension. Yes, it does, and it makes it even cooler because you can jump back and forth from code to design just as much as that. And I don't know if I should be saying this, but I'm actually thinking about this little open source project where you draw a model on Draw.io and just generate the C# class out of it. Something that we used to do a long time ago in Visual Studio back with the .NET framework time. But anyway, well, let's do demos. Let's go ahead and start a new project. All right, so I'm going to start a new project. Here's the thing about, it takes a little bit of time, to just, start from scratch. And a lot of the things that I'm going to show you today compared to what OData configuration time is a lot simpler, and it would take a lot less time. But I want people to see how everything works from scratch. I want you to see every single step so the people that will be watching this video can follow step by step what I'm doing and try it themselves at home. Yes, please try this at home and at school and everywhere else. So without any further ado, just for the people that are seeing this Visual Studio instance, can you guys see my shared screen by any chance? No?
Sorry.
Okay, let me try this again. Let's see, Window, Visual Studio, share. How about now?
Okay. Yep.
There we go.
Perfect. This is Visual Studio 2022. People, please go ahead and download it. It's awesome. It's cool. It has a lot of new features in it, and it basically writes the code for you. So I'm just gonna yes.
And it's 64-bit.
At 64-bit. Yes. And I'm gonna share here the selection. Yeah. I disconnected that intentionally so I could kind of share the window where I'm selecting a project. Let's see. Does it let you do that? No, it doesn't. Oh man, that's a bummer, because there's this little pop-up window that comes out from there that basically allows you to select a project. But this one is super quick. It's just an ASP.NET Core API. So I'm just going to select that real quick in here, and we'll jump right back into. So I'm just going to call this Demo API. I know you can't see that. I'm sorry. I'm using .NET 6 Preview, by the way. So this is the latest and greatest. If you are, if you haven't tried .NET 6 yet, please go ahead immediately right now, drop everything, and go use.
You get a performance boost just for using it. Like you don't even have to do anything, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. So if you start a new API project like this, you get that little nice template in here that gives you a bunch of things going on. I'm just gonna go ahead and delete everything because I can. I'm just gonna throw everything here away completely. I'm just gonna organize the project here a little bit. So let's start every project that you try to build. You start immediately from the model. So let's just start from the models. I'm gonna create here a simple student model just because we're all students. students, and we can do that. So a student, I'm just gonna put an ID in here. You know, for the people that are looking, you can see that it's doing the thinking for me. I didn't even do anything, and it's saying, "Hey, you want to add a name? Sure, why not?" And if I take another line and says, "Hey, you want to add a description?" No, I don't want to add the description of the student. That would be a little inappropriate. I don't want to do that. This is not an investigation. So I'm just going to add an ID and a name and maybe a score. I'm just going to go ahead in here and say, "Hey, this is a score for the student, whatever score is, you know, whatever they grades they have, whatever the case may be." Control KE will clean up your project. Just a little bit of a Visual Studio, you know, quick tip there. And then I'm gonna create a controller, just a simple controller, an API controller. Let's go ahead in here and pop that up, and a simple API controller like this. And I'm gonna call it students controller. Again, the pop-up window doesn't really show up, unfortunately, but you know, here's the basically the controller endpoint, and I'm just gonna go here and say HTTP GET, and I'm just gonna return a simple list of students. And we're gonna talk a little bit about iQueryable versus, you know, IEnumerable. What does that mean? How can OData support, you know, the querying? Because a lot of people have asked me this question. They said to me, you know, Hassan, I don't want to save everything in memory in order for me to get an OData query. And I agree with them 100%. And this is, we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Anyway, let's have this guy that's doing the thinking for me do a little bit of magic here. So it's creating a new student. And I'm going to do a quick ID here. Here's a new ID. And here is a name. It would be funny if the name came up and the autocomplete said Jeremy. That would freak me out. I would leave this channel right now, just walk right out, you know, and be like, okay, that's it. So Jeremy here, right? And then I'm gonna add all of you guys because I can. So here's another ID, and then I'm gonna add the name here, and then I'm gonna add Arthur. Shai, how do you spell your name? Am I saying your name right?
You're actually very surprisingly saying it correctly. I spell it S-H-A-Y, but yes, it's pronounced Shy.
S-H-A-Y.
We
Nice.
were interacting with Shai for like 3 years, 4 years over the internet before we met him in person, and we were saying Shay the whole
Did you
time.
keep calling him
showed
Shay?
up, yeah, and then he's like, "It's
Yeah.
Shai." Like, oh, okay.
I'm honestly very impressed, Hassan. Really, this never happened.
See, I thought it was hey, and the S was just silent, but
Yeah.
that's not the case.
Okay, I got all of you on the program, so now I am the matrix. I'm the architect of the matrix, and you guys are all in my world now. So I have this endpoint, and this endpoint, all I have to do now is to run this API and just hit the API/students, and you know, naturally it's just going to return all the students. Let's see if that works. I don't know. Let's find out. So I'm just going to share.
If it doesn't, you might want to.
Tell me.
I was going to say, if it doesn't work, you might want to share a window instead of an app. That might be what's happening.
Sure. So I'm yeah. So this is what I'm doing. Actually, I'm actually sharing. Oh, I see what you're saying. Sharing window. Yes, absolutely. So let me share. What comes out of that. As soon as I did run the application, you know, Swagger, the new template for ASP.NET Core with .NET 6, it'll just generate the Swagger for you outside of the box. So you have the student, you have all the little attributes in here, and you have the get student. All I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say try it out and just execute. Lo and behold, we are getting a bunch of students, which is great. So the API endpoint works. Yay, right? Which means you can also do it. I usually use Postman, but if you don't want to use Postman and use something else, by all means, go ahead and just hit the API endpoint like that. There's some people that use Fiddler as well. I don't know, Jeremy, what do you use? What do you guys use for your API testing? Is it just Postman as well for everybody?
It depends. I actually like the HTTP REPL.
Oh, really? Nice. And I also seen people do PowerShell. You know, they just do the PowerShell call. I think they're showing off. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's beyond my pay grade. So anyway,
wget.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Arthur, what were you saying? I think Arthur said I don't run it. I just run it in my head, and I know what comes
No,
out.
I said I'm a manager, so I don't ever do this kind of thing. I just ask Shai to do it for me.
That's one way to do it. All right.
That's why he enjoys being a manager so much.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
that's
can
right.
tell. I can tell. He's rubbing it in your face. He's telling you, there it is. I'm your manager. So anyway, so we have all of this, and I give all of you 0 score, which is really embarrassing. I forgot to put a value in there. I'm sorry about that. We're gonna have to start putting some scores in there because it's important for our demo. But here's the deal. So I have all of these students, but what if I just want to find information about Jeremy? Right? I don't want to, I don't want to pull all the students. Like, imagine I'm returning a list of 3 students, but, imagine an actual schooling system where you have some historical students included, some 250,000 students or 50,000 students, and, you don't want to pull in that data just to find Jeremy. That's really hard. That would be a really bad way to do it. So let's go ahead and do some OData magic, my friends. Are you guys ready for some OData magic? Let's do that.
Yes, we are.
So okay, perfect. So here is my, this is demo API. Share the screen here. All right. Before I do that, I'm gonna give you guys some scores. Please don't take that personal. It's just a random arbitrary numbers. So I'm just gonna. So here's 200.
So you're not just gonna delete Shai and Arthur, because that would get you Jeremy.
Look at this. It gave Shay 1,000. I swear to God, I didn't come up with that. It's just figuring it out on its own. Okay, fine, whatever.
It knows. VS knows everything.
Our robot overlords, they decided that Shy is 1,000.
And for good reason,
too. Important. Manager, a little bit more important. Actual developer, 1,000. Yes.
All right. So we have all that good stuff in there. Now let's go ahead and add OData, my friends. OData setup has become even more simpler than it used to be. Like, I remember the last time I talked to Jeremy, we used to have to add 4 whole lines of code in order to make it work. Today, it's even a lot simpler. Let's just see what it takes today to make this work. So I'm just going to search for OData and then OData ASP.NET Core. So Microsoft ASP.NET, not this one. I want ASP, give me a second there. I want Microsoft ASP.NET Core.
So what's the difference between the ASP.NET OData and just the regular OData packages?
So here's the deal. OData has multiple modules, right? You can actually use OData to do transcendence of, like, let's say you have a microservice and another microservice, and you don't really care about setting up the protocol. You just want to use the core OData to basically translate a query that's coming from somewhere else into an expression, what we call an expression tree, which is what iQueryable, IEnumerable end up being anyway. You can actually use these modules, individually, but also additionally, you will see something like ASP.NET. Sorry, ASP.NET.OData. That's for the framework, for ASP.NET framework, not the core, because, like I said, 2007. We've been around for a very long time, and we went through all the iteration, even before .NET Core was even a thing at a time. So anyway, so let me install this guy here. I don't know, Arthur, does that answer your question? I feel like
Yes, it does. Yeah, okay. Yes, definitely.
Okay, perfect. So that's all I did. I just installed the module in here. And watch this. All I have to do here is to go on add controllers and just say .add OData. Control period. It will pull in the reference. And then here's the good thing about all of this. You get to control what kind of options you have. Right? So if I go here and say, okay, here's a bunch of options, and my option here, I want to add something like filter, for instance. I want to add filter capability. I'm just going to start with one simple option, and then we're going to work our way towards the rest of it. So this is all you have to do. Just add OData option, and then the other thing that you have to do is to go up in here on the controller and you say enable query. And there is nothing else you have to do other than these 2 things. All of the sudden, and I like to take that approach. There are 2 approaches for OData. There's ADM approach, and there's the simple approach. And this simple approach is the one I prefer personally, because it doesn't break your existing clients. Like if you already have a running API and you already have some 20, 30 really important partners that are already consuming your API endpoint, you don't have to break their system, just to add OData on top of it. You'll tell them, hey, whatever endpoint you're already using, please go ahead and use it, but also you can do this on top of that. Okay, so this is all I did. I went in here, I said add OData, filter, and I went into the students controller and I said add enable query. Let's run this guy again and let's see what happens this time. Now other things are going to happen. So I'm going to stop sharing screen here. I'm going to share my there you go. The thing is, like, if you guys can see behind me, this is like a 49-inch monitor. If I share my whole monitor with the group, nobody's going to be able to see nothing. Forget about, unless you have the same monitor, you won't be able to see anything. So so let's just go ahead here and go to this view. Okay, what's different now? So your Swagger is still working, right? But the difference here is really, really substantial. Like if I go here and say students, let's just make sure that our existing implementation is in place. Great, I have everything in place. Now I can go ahead in here and say $, right? Filter equal, and I can go and say score, which is my score, right, is less than, let's say 1,000, like this. So just a very simple query that I'm doing here. And if I go and execute, what happens? It immediately returned to me only the students that are that have a score that's less than 1,000, right? I can do so many more things with this filter, just this one tiny option. If I go and say, filter name equal Jeremy, like this, it gives me just Jeremy.
Very cool.
Think about the possibilities.
How do I know what the syntax is for doing those kinds of filters?
That's a great question. So because OData is a protocol, everything is standardized on the odata.org website, the best way to rest. I love that motto. It's amazing. The best way to rest. You feel like they're selling pillows or something.
Yes.
I don't know, comforters? I don't know.
Memory
anyway.
foam, OData.
So anyway, all the tutorials, all the steps, it starts with basic tutorial. It shows you all the little details and the little capabilities that you can do. Like in here, you can say, okay, you can search this way. You can do filtering. Like if I go and say, I want to do the filtering option, here's the filter option. Here's first name equals Scott. Just like the same way I said, name equal Jeremy, the exact same way is what I'm doing in here. And and basically, you can also do contains. There are so many different options in here that you can get outside of the box just simply by adding this one option, which is .filter. All right, so this is this part. I see someone asking the question. If that's okay, I'll pick up something. That's my eye sometimes catches a question. Someone's asking, is this executing on the server? Absolutely, it is executing on the server, but not just on the API server. Like if I replace, let me just explain a little piece here. I'm gonna go back to Draw.io because it's Draw.io and it makes sense. I'll just go into Draw.io here real quick and explain to people a couple of things. This demo that I made, yes, you are absolutely right. The demo that I made, I'm creating this list in memory, right? That list is running in memory. But in the real life example, what I use this for actual enterprise applications, if you put the entity framework here to be the communicator between your API and your database, what's actually happening is that the query will go through the entity framework and actually execute on the database. The beautiful thing about the entity framework today is that it's not strongly coupled or tightly coupled with any particular storage technology. Entity framework can today work with SQL, NoSQL, which is Cosmos. It can work with, you guys probably know this more than I. What's the other one? MySQL.
Our most popular
MySQL.
ones: SQL Server, MySQL, Postgres, SQLite, and then non-relational Cosmos, and then we have the in-memory provider. But don't use that one.
Okay. So someone might ask me, well, I don't know, you're just saying things. I don't know if that's true. I'd be like, yeah, that's I agree with you 100%. Let me show you here something real quick just for everybody to be able to, if you go into our official blog, you'll find not just promises, but also code that you can actually use. Go to divblog.microsoft.com and then go to more, and then data development, and then OData, and then you'll see a couple of things. You'll see graph native support for OData. That's because a lot of people are using OData. The endpoint routing, Cosmos DB. I'll give you 3 different approaches for working with Cosmos with the Entity framework to use OData, and so many others like that. Like all these different platforms that you can think of, that allows you to basically consume OData from whatever type of storage that you're considering to use. But more importantly, this is a thing that I really appreciate about the Entity framework and the Entity framework team and all the work that they're putting in there. In the enterprise world, there are 3 different types of data. There's hot and warm and cold data. And each one of those, it's not one size fit all. Like you can't use SQL Server all the time for everything. You can't use Cosmos all the time for everything. And so is the case with everything. So it depends on really, how your data is being consumed and how it's being persisted. Now that the Entity framework is technology agnostic in terms of storage, now you can determine whichever type of storage that fits your enterprise application, and then use that to basically, you're still powered by, OData, you're still powered by the Entity framework, and it doesn't matter what storage that you're relying on. And that really what matters the most. This is like I said, we have come a long way, and now we're at this place where all these technologies and this bundle of technologies, ASP.NET, OData, and Entity framework are coming together to give you the best possible engineering experience possible. Let's
Absolutely.
go back to the demo. Unless there are any questions that you guys have.
Fox
any
Pro?
questions? What's Fox Pro? What's that? I don't know what that is. Sorry.
Yeah, you might be out of luck with Fox Pro.
Is that like a blockchain thing or Bitcoin thing? I don't know.
It'll probably be reinvented now as a blockchain thing.
It's more like a Silverlight thing.
Yes.
Silverlight. Okay. Okay, so let's go back a little bit to so I also see someone in the chat, asking about Blazor, using OData with Blazor. There's actually, you're in luck, my friend, because I think Jeremy and I have had a live demo of doing this with Blazor, but also there's enabling pagination. Is it pagination or pagination? I don't know. So you could enable, with Blazor, and you can work with Blazor end to end and integrate your system with a Blazor application. There isn't an example out there yet that I have made for WebAssembly Blazor. This is server-side Blazor, but if time allows, I will definitely be more than happy to kind of put an example out there so people could actually, take advantage of it and work with it with WebAssembly. Absolutely, 100%. And that's where it's actually going to be the most useful, because if you're using Blazor WebAssembly, you don't have to scale your server anymore because your logic is just in a CDN, living in a CDN out there, and people are just pulling it in and running their application. So absolutely. Anyway, let's go back to the demo.
May, there is one question here that I think might be relevant. This is the one, if this is filtering at the web server side instead of the DB side, what about performance? Basically, the question here is, okay, we've established the filtering is happening on the server side, but where exactly in the server side is it happening? Is it on the web side, on the web tier, so to speak, or on the database tier? And I think, yeah, go ahead.
The filtering will happen on the database side as long as you're passing in an iQueryable all the way up to your server. So if your API server has an iQueryable in here, that's a very, very important question. If you have an iQueryable in here, and you're using the Entity framework, which basically gives you an idea of a query, not really materialized data yet, as soon as OData comes in, it will add that expression on top of that iQueryable, and then Entity framework will take that iQueryable and execute it on the database. That's what makes this really viable and useful for enterprise big applications, right? But let's say at some point in time you said, okay, I don't want to use a database, I want to use a memory. it'll work as well. If you have a list, if you have an iQueryable, if you have a, whatever you have, it doesn't matter, because this is where the execution will happen. That's what makes OData really, really, really powerful. Really powerful.
So purely out of my own curiosity, this is obviously very powerful when you link it to iQueryable. Any sort of link provider with iQueryable, such as EF Core, it's like a go-between between your, the OData standard query language, as you've shown it, to the the
database.
standard exactly
Yep.
expression
Yep.
tree kind of thing, which then is EF Core's job to translate to SQL and so on. Are there any examples of, just really purely out of my own curiosity, of using OData without a link provider behind the scenes, without iQueryable, translating to some other, fulfillment of the query in some way?
If you don't, so the example that I just made, the demo that I just made, that guy doesn't use iQueryable. It's just a plain old list, right? So that will execute in memory, right? That will just run on your server. That's because I'm not connected to any database at all, right? But if you have a provider that returns a list, this is where it gets a little tricky. It won't be able to execute that unless your provider somehow is giving you this capability to pass in an expression on top of the materialized list that it returns, so it goes and executes it on the server. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. See, this is a problem that really bothers me a lot, because OData is amazing and great, and there are scenarios where you don't have the kind of luxury to return an iQueryable, right? So I will talk a little bit about OData Next and Transcendence in OData Next, because I love the movie Transcendence. It's a great, and I also like Johnny Depp, so it's a problem. So, but anyway, I will show you how you can transcend an OData query downstream, so you pass it to a provider that doesn't really honor an iQueryable. It doesn't know how to return an iQueryable. It doesn't have this, capability of giving you an iQueryable. What do we do then, right? I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. Any more questions before we jump back into OData Magic?
We have a lot of questions, but I don't think we're going to be answer all of these live, and I think you're probably covering things as we go. So I suggest we just go back into doing the demo, and then we can kind of catch up on some questions later, maybe.
Awesome. We'll do that then. So, okay, so we talked a little bit about, the filtering capability, right? We said, I want to find only students that are called Jeremy, and we went through that part. What else can OData give me outside of the box, something easy that I can use today? I can go back here and offer and show you a new capability in here. So on top of filtering, I can also add something called select. So what is that? In a lot of APIs, out there, sometimes, especially if you're calling an API that's pulling from a NoSQL, so it's basically pulling a document. It's giving you an entire document, and this document could have as many, like I've seen a model that has, I'm not kidding you, 175 attributes. 175 attributes. And that's okay, because it's called data storage. You want to just put stuff in there and pull that stuff from there. It doesn't matter, how many attributes is there. A file is a file is a file. It doesn't matter. So there is no normalization there, right? You have one big object with nested objects, JSON objects in it, and you want to work around that. What if I don't want all of that data? Like my model, I don't want to transfer all that data over the wire. I want to do something simple. I just want the name. I don't want the ID. I don't want the score. I don't want any of that stuff. How does that work? So I'm going to go up in here and go back to the web page here. And I'm going to hit the API endpoint again. So API/students, like this. It's giving me all the students. And then I'm going to do $select. And I just want the name. See what happened there? It shaped the data for you in a way that only fits what you need. And this really works great, especially for clients and consumers that define their own kind. Let's say that there's a Java application that wants to integrate with this API endpoint right now, and they really don't care about the other 2,000 attributes that you have in your model. I just want this. What if I want more than one? Let's say I want the name and the score, but keep these IDs for someone else. Just a little comma there, and then add the second property or the second attribute. Boom, you got 2 attributes, 2 properties outside the box, just like that.
So question, can we convert name, uppercase N, to name when selecting data like this?
So uppercase, lowercase, is that the...
Yes.
So the previous versions of OData didn't really care about the casing, right? They didn't really care about the casing. You're gonna have to play around with Newtonsoft JSON to kind of get it to kind of ignore the casing, and you can do something like that today. If you decide to go that route, you could do that. It's up to you to how you want to configure your API response. Absolutely, but for now, it's just it's honoring whatever your model is. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Can I project name to something different? Like if I want to call name Appellation?
I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can do that in here. It's only gonna return the attributes or the properties that fit, whatever matches the model that you have in your API.
So I think that's the crucial point, right? When you're working with OData, you've kind of got this model of what your data looks like, and the things that you're interacting with that are also understanding OData should also understand that same model. Kind of like when you build a model in your entity framework and you say you've got these entities and properties, it's a similar kind of concept. And so while you could manipulate, when you're creating a JSON payload to send somewhere else and change the shape of that, it's not really what OData is designed to do itself. Would that be accurate?
Yes. It's really strictly tied to the schema of the model that you're trying to return. Yes.
So I have a question. So before you did filter, you put enable filter, and before you did select, you did the enable select thing or whatever it was. What would happen if you tried to do select without doing that?
Oh, that's a great question. So there is a capability, for instance, called order by. Right, just like filter and select. Let's say I want to order by score. It'll say this specified argument was out of range. It's not valid. It's not supported, basically.
And
so why is it then that things are not enabled? Why can I just not do everything that I want just straight out of the box?
Not do it. If you do add OData, it'll just enable everything by default. Like you don't have to do it. Yeah, I'm just trying to give you the. So if you just do OData, you can play whatever you want, but I want you to see how much control you have, and even that control is still not secure. Like for some cases, and like I said, we use that in our internal application in the real world. So there will be situations where I don't want to offer the filtering on my controller. Like let's say this student controller here, right? I don't want, even though the generic configuration says enable filtering, for a particular, let's say you have multiple controller endpoints, I don't want to allow that controller endpoint to allow filtering. You can actually go and specify particular attributes that can be enabled within the query in here. So let's see here. Let's see. So this is enable query. Navigation, expand property filter query option. Navigation, just a second. See, there's a bunch of options in here that basically would allow you to basically select whether you can enable the queries or not. Give me a second there. We could probably do that real quick. Let's see here. Filtering.
So would it be a best practice to only enable the things that people need, or does that really depend? Okay, and that's also, essentially to prevent just any security, any overfetching, that kind of thing.
That's why, like muscle memory outside of the box, I just go and say options filter select, right? Like for instance, you want to allow, like there's something in here where you say max stop, set max stop, and don't allow people to pull more than 100 records at a time from your API. You see, this is something that's very common today. Like a lot of people might create an API endpoint that says retrieve all, and they forget to kind of limit the page size. Yeah. And what happens is you end up with a popular API that has millions of records, and now you're basically handing a pure API DDoS mechanism to the hackers on a silver plate, and telling them, go ahead and DDoS me and have me pay thousands of dollars in scaling. If you have auto scaling on, I will pray for you, because your bill is going to be quite tremendous. But anyway,
so I'll pick up on that. Just one more question. So going forward from DDoS, there's obviously also a question where, for example, I want to limit somebody to only see the rows that belong to their user account, for example, right? To only select something from where the user ID is something that comes from the session, like the HTTP session or that I'm logged into and so on. So I'm assuming, obviously, this kind of thing also, because as you said, like the most, when I see something like this, everybody who sees something like this should think about security and DDoS, and not just DDoS, also about leaks. That's the first thing that comes to mind, right? Because you're basically opening up your database, assuming there's an EF core or something like that. You basically just put your database online on the internet, right?
Yes.
Which is a very, very problematic thing.
Yes, and this is the first thing, like people have been in the industry for a while. The first thing they're gonna ask you about be like, "Oh my God, you just allowed people to destroy my API." And the next question
Yes.
will be like, "How come?" You'll be like, "This navigation piece that you just proposed," and I'm gonna talk about that in a little bit. This navigation piece that you just proposed, it's basically opening up the door for anybody to kind of go through my data model and go through my server and expose any data they want. This is why, and let me jump back right here into Visual Studio, is that this is why we always go back. I'm sorry, I kind of stepped away from that one, but you get to control here what arithmetic operations you want to allow, what logical operations you want to allow, what order by operations you want to allow on the controller method level. You can do it on the whole controller level, so controller by controller, or you can do it across the entire API, or you can do it down to the API endpoint, which is what makes this technology just amazing. They thought about everything. And since 2007, it's used across big organizations, big enterprises. Of course, they ran into these situations. This is not someone who sat there and thought, oh, we shouldn't probably do that. No, this is someone who has a scar on the back, a mark on the back to show for. They got DDoS and said, oh, we should probably not do that. So it's experience. It's experience based. So anyway, so let me just show you this real quick. So there's allow query options, right? So what query options do I want to allow on? So I want to allow select, skip. I want to allow top. I want to allow order by, down to the API level, down to the API endpoint level, which is a lot of power in and of itself. Now, let me go back to the question where you said, okay, what if I have a user, right, that I want them to only see particular attributes, right? I want them to only see particular attributes, and I don't want them to even know about other attributes that exist in the system. There's two ways you can do that, okay? The first way you can do that is that on your controller itself, you see that enable query option that you have in here. You can go up in here and you say, this is OData query option. Basically, when I say enable query in here, what it's basically doing is injecting this input parameter there, right? It's just saving you, the confusion of having to do a little bit of magic. Now that I have this option in here, this guy here, so let's go like this. Just a second. Option dot. This option here allows you to kind of dissect the query and control it programmatically to see what needs to be applied, like see to apply to, and then you pass in an iQueryable in there. That's literally what it's doing underneath. It's taking that query as an input parameter and it's applying it to whatever type you're returning as a list on iQueryable. At this point, you get to go and say, okay, what is this query that's coming in? What kind of attributes that are coming in? And let's compare that to the user, and let me build my own middleware somehow to do that. But that's not how I would go do it. If I'm building an application software today, what I would do is that, SQL today can give you this capability from a security standpoint where you can hide particular columns in a database table based on the user that's coming in, that's authenticating in. I haven't done it yet. I'm not going to lie to you, but I know about it, right? So go ahead and research, and I'm not going to pretend here that, oh, I do that all the time. Nope. I know that it exists, but you're going to have to do a little bit of research. That's how I would do it, or where I would start, basically, when it comes to showing hiding attributes. Okay, so there's all of that. So we talked about the select. We talked about the filtering, right? There's also the order by, and this is the one that I was just talking about a second ago, order by, right? Let's say I want to allow the capability of where my OData endpoint does even the ordering, because ordering is also an operation that would mostly be better fitting on a SQL server rather than having the client pull all the data and then back again, go ahead and reorder that data. So I'm just going to go ahead in here and say, okay, API endpoint students, I'm just going to say order by, right, equal score. And this is why I put that score in there. Order by score, it's by default, it's ascending order, so 100, 200, 1000. Someone says, no, I don't like it this way. I want it to be a descending order. Just take a space and do DESC. Boom. You have the descending order right there. All of it executing back on the backend server, wherever you keep your data, and you don't have to do that on your API.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking it's always interesting to see how this same set of logical operators, query operators, kind of stepping back here, you can see them once happening on the SQL level, which is our lowest level kind of layer. Then you have them in .NET and Link itself. So Link itself obviously has this set of operators, and that's what the expression tree is composed of. And then we see these same kind of things again happening here at the OData layer, which is, it's interesting to see these different layers reproduce the exact same universal concepts coming to queries.
Actually, just to visualize what you just said for people, I think that's actually a great point to kind of show people, like, your query that's coming in here, it's basically saying something like $filter, right? And it's saying, score less than 200. So this is the HTTP language.
Sorry, we weren't seeing you, but now we are.
Yeah, that's fine. So this is the HTTP language. And then the API itself is picking this up, like OData is converting this down there into a statement, an expression that says where, right, student.score is less than 200.
Yeah.
And then it goes all the way down here in the database. This is the beauty about this. And then you go all the way down here in the database and you go and say where, right, score less than 200.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of all that. You have all of these, every realm and every component is speaking its own language, but at the end of the day, it's like you have a bunch of translators, and they're just taking that from one level to the next. So there's that piece. The same thing happens. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I just wanted to do a time check. We're about 5 minutes from the top of the hour, and I know you had 3 amazing new concepts that you wanted to share from OData that you mentioned in the beginning. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yes. So I'm gonna suggest something here. Like, we've had so many questions in the chat that we haven't been able to get to. So I think we need to invite Hassan back for another session where he just basically answers OData questions for everybody, if you'll be willing to do that. So sorry we haven't been able to get to all of your questions now, but we'll put another one on the schedule, right, Jeremy? I don't know when the next slot is, but I'm sure we can find one and answer your questions then.
Yeah, we can find one.
And I think, in addition, we can run over a little bit if that's okay with everyone. And I think it would be good for us to talk a little bit about GraphQL and OData, since that's been asked now about 5 or 6 times in the chat, I think. So let's get to your things, and then let's finish with the OData GraphQL thing. Make sense?
Absolutely. Sounds good. Okay. I could talk all day. so okay. Thank you for keeping me in check. Otherwise, we will go. We'll run out of tape.
Yeah.
Okay. So so let's talk about the future of OData. So, working with OData, using it in real world applications and all that kind of stuff, you start wondering, okay, how can I take this to the next level? Okay. And this is just, before I start talking about any of that, this is just an advice for all the engineers out there. Don't just settle. There's always more out there that you can do, especially when you invest in the engineering experience. If you make the engineers happy, eventually they will give you products and software that is perfect, as perfect as it can be, as a side effect of how they feel about the systems that they're building. And because of that investment in the engineering experience, I got together with the amazing team that we have here at Microsoft, the OData team, Sam Zhu, and everybody, Christoph, everybody. And I basically said, hey guys, I have a proposal. There are 3 things that we can do for OData, the next version of OData, OData 9, or OData Next, that can actually improve everything for OData tremendously. The first proposal is, we want to have OData be technology agnostic. What that basically means is that if I want to use OData with GPRC, if I want to use OData by just simply literally reading the query from a file on my computer, or pulling it out from a Bluetooth in the air, it doesn't matter. I don't have to be tied to any particular protocol. So this is the number one thing that is really, really important for all of this, is that I don't want people to be tied to APIs, because as all of you may know, and you have went through the WCF era, and before WCF, what were we doing before WCF, Jeremy? What was the big thing back then? Were we just passing files to each other in emails? Send the whole code in email to people?
We were doing RPC calls over IPX.
Cobra, C++.
DCOM.
No, Corba. Yeah, Corba.
DCOM, right? DCOM on Windows.
DCOM.
Yeah.
and just create that object in memory, and who knows where it's at. So anyway,
only 12 steps and 2 hours to configure your server. So yeah.
Right. So
little quick story here. Back in, I don't know, 1990 something, maybe 91 or something like that, I wrote a distributed Mandelbrot generator that worked by sharing files on a distributed, on a network file system. So that's how I was doing it back then. It was awesome, but it was a lot slower than just running on one machine.
Yeah.
Fractals are awesome.
So what did we learn from that, right? The difference between humans and fish is that we learn from our mistakes from the past. Fish never learns from their mistakes. They continue to take the bait since the beginning of fish, so we're supposed to learn something from that, right? So we continue to evolve and learn. And the thing that I learned about the protocols and the communication between different application software is that protocols never stay there forever. What we call the bestest, protocol today, probably 10 years from now is going to be something that people say, how did you guys even live with API endpoints? How did you even live with HTTP protocols and all that? Why would you even use that, right? So if that's the case, then it would probably be a better engineering decision and a better design to keep OData completely agnostic from API endpoints, from HTTP communication, from all of that. I want OData to work with GPRC. I want it to work with whatever people want it to work with. If someone somewhere, and I know they do exist, wherever you are, I know you exist, is still using WCF or SOAP protocols, I want them to still to be able to kind of incorporate, whatever technology they have, especially with OData, and work with it simply. So that's the first piece. The first piece is technology agnostic, not to have to depend on anything else. And I'm going to share my screen here real quick for just the vision. The vision here is to be able to go and say, check this out. The vision here is to basically go and say, if I have a service, and I'm just going to call it a service, it's not an API, it's nothing, it's just a service. And I have multiple consumers around that service that don't just use different technologies in terms of programming languages, but also use different protocols. That's the next step. I want all of these people to still be able to consume OData from that service, whether it's RESTful or GPRC, WCF, whatever they're using, and the service would still be able to accommodate all of them without having to be tied or strongly tied to a particular protocol. So it's protocol agnostic. It's truly the next step that we can take in this whole communication and design and architecture future for components like that. So that's the first piece. The second piece is transcendence. And what that basically means is that I want to have one service. Let's say in a microservices architecture, let's say you have something like a gatekeeper in here, and your gatekeeper is handing over to, let's say, this microservice 1. So this is microservice 1. And the gatekeeper is basically protecting your entire microservices architecture. So you have your architecture right here. Let me send that to the back real quick. And you have your services, and this guy is protecting all the different services that you have in a microservice architecture. Okay, we're in this day and age where there's micro front ends, microservices, and everyone is breaking that apart, and you have that gatekeeper or gateway, whatever people call it, front door, whatever people call it these days, to communicate with these microservices. I want my OData query to be able to transcend downstream from one service to another. So if this is my OData query here coming from my client, I want my gatekeeper to be able to pick up that query and turn it back, like turn it into an expression and pull that expression, convert it back into an OData query that can push it downstream through a RESTful client to the next microservice. That's a transcendence piece, and this is really important in order for OData to live and evolve. You know what they say: survival is not for the strongest or the fittest, but survival is for those who are able to adapt. So this adaptation, in the technology, that's really what we're thinking about in terms of OData next. So this is another piece, and then the last piece here.
Oh.
The most important
piece.
It
looks like we lost Hassan. Hopefully he'll come back.
Wow, that's a cliffhanger.
And the key, the third piece that ties it all together and makes this the most amazing thing you ever heard is
the ultimate answer to the question of life.
42.
Well,
all right. Well, we'll give him a couple minutes to pop back on.
Yes.
Because I'm really interested to hear his perspective of GraphQL and OData too, if we have time.
Yes.
Yeah. Everybody is.
The last piece is disappearance. Communication, transcendence, and disappearance. Yeah, maybe that's what he did. Click the Leaf Studios right next to it.
I pulled out the
Welcome back.
That's what we call the Irish exit. Just run out. Don't say hi or goodbye or anything. Just run. just
on
say
the most
goodbye.
important third piece, and then you're gone.
Yes. So apparently I closed the window. I forgot that this is running on a web page, our stream. So I was like, what is this? This is the streaming? We don't need that. Shut it down. Sorry about that. So okay, the last thing is the the last part in the modernization piece for OData or OData Next is the modularization. What is this modularization stuff? What is this sorcery basically? Let's say Jeremy at some point in time went and said, I don't want to use the outside of the box filter and select and order by. I want to make my own. I want to make something that's sounds like a fuzzy search capability that I want to add to my OData capability. So instead of going and saying something to the effect of, let me share my screen here again, and hopefully I don't shut you guys off. That was kind of weird. So let me go down here and let's say, okay, so let's say I'm communicating with my API endpoint, and instead of filter, let's say Jeremy went ahead. You guys know that SQL will give you outside of the box soundex, which will basically, you can pass Melissa with one S and it will find Melissa with two S's. If you don't know about that, people in the channel, the people in the comment section, please, I will share a video where it shows it. It basically offers you a, should we say Bing-like or Google-like capability? I don't know. When you search on a search engine, and it says, did you mean this? Did you mean that? That's that capability. It's outside of the box in SQL. It's amazing. It's mind-blowing. But let's say I want to take that to OData. So I want to go here and say sounds like, right? And I want to go here and say name, right, equal something like, let's say I misspelled Jeremy's name, so I said Jeremy like this, right? I want this modularization. I want people to be able to treat OData like a marketplace, right? You can develop your own modules and post it out there on NuGet, right? And people could download these modules, and immediately they have new capabilities. Filtering, cool. Searching, like for instance, Jeremy just asked me the question. He said, can I turn the name into something else? Maybe that can be a module that someone could add, and they can go and say, rename, $rename, name as something else, title or something, or first name. So these are the three things that I have identified, and if you guys go to, I forgot, I think I added this link in there in OData Next. If you go to, if you type on Google OData Next, like this, the first thing that's going to pop up is OData OData Next, it seems like it has a lot of, good attention from people. It talks about each and every one of those, and every single session, like stand-up sessions like the ones we're having in here, I basically go ahead and I post the video, and we basically really dive deep into every single piece of how we can, kind of break OData apart and basically reassemble it in a way that allows people to add their own modules and all that. I think this is basically what I feel like is the future of OData, and I'm really actively driving this development, working with the OData team to make it a reality. And that's basically the future of OData. I don't know.
So go vote for that issue, everybody.
Yes.
Is that something where you're potentially looking for help from the community in implementing some of this stuff too? I mean, we're all open source on out there now.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna push as hard as I can, as much as I can, but every help is greatly appreciated. I want everyone to be part of the future of OData. I want you to come in and be a part of it, because I'm a simple-minded person. So if it doesn't fit in my head, it's not simple enough, right? So I'm gonna make it really simple. I want a grandma in Nebraska to be able to write OData. That's the goal. So we'll see how far we can take that one.
Okay, sounds great. Should we finish with OData versus GraphQL? Who's going to start?
So the one thing I want people to understand, that GraphQL and OData are similar and different at the same time, in terms of, you're basically creating a protocol where you can filter and query and shape the data however you want. Of course, these two technologies are basically targeting that. The best thing I can share here, and this is something, the people that actually did the research and actually went deeper into this, there's some guy, somewhere, that decided to go and do the research. And of course, it's famous and popular for everyone. Stack Overflow is where you find all these magical things. So I'm going to share this page from Stack Overflow with people that basically gives you a little bit of a high-level comparison between OData and GraphQL. So you have the standard query capabilities. Mind you that this post was in 16 and updated on 19. Okay, so if GraphQL have kind of worked, if the group on GraphQL have basically updated these capabilities, please by all means. One thing that I have learned from this post is that also Oracle offers its own protocol called ORDS, and it's basically something like OData, but with some capabilities that may or may not exist. So you have standard query capabilities, yes, surfacing, all of that is across the board, but then maturity of specification, GraphQL is still at this, infancy stage. I think, how old is GraphQL? Is it like 2 years old or 3 years old, something like that?
It's a lot older than that now, I think.
It's only a few years old. It's
but still newer.
Mature in use, but the specification is still.
Oh, right. Yeah, the specification is much newer, yes.
Right. At the time of this video, at the time of this post, at least, the API versioning maintenance was enabled or possible in OData and ORDS, but it's not there in GraphQL. I don't know if that's still the case. It's been 2 years, so maybe things have changed. There's also the filtering, ordering, and aggregation of data. I see in here that, there are some capabilities that I don't know if the person that posted this is a super OData enthusiast or not, but I know that GraphQL might be offering some form of ordering today. So like I said,
well, I think seen that so some of these are hard to. Oh, go ahead, Shai.
No, go ahead. You're the expert.
No, I was just going to say some of these things, the GraphQL doesn't take an opinion on it, so it facilitates filtering, ordering, and aggregation. It's not baked into the spec, so the implementation varies based on what people's needs are. For example, GitHub loves the endless page, right? So you're just, here's some items for a page, fetch the next page. You're not necessarily, this is page 2 of 50. Someone else might want to implement something more precise. And so same thing with versioning. Versioning can be done with GraphQL. It's not baked into the specification. So it's kind of hard to do a comparison in that note.
Gotcha. And then there's things like surface capability. There is the transactions, there is batch read write. The batch capability in OData is very, very strong. Like let me show you guys this. You might actually find this really interesting. this is for the people in also watching us. If you look at let's go to OData here. There's something called batching in OData, which basically says if you have multiple API requests that you want to send, instead of having to send them one by one, you can just go and send a list of API calls that you want to make on that API, and the API will return back. I'll show you this real quick here. It's really cool. It basically will return back not just the response, but even if the API, like let's see, here's a list, here's a bunch of requests, and you're sending a list of requests to an OData enabled endpoint, right? I want to search for this student and that student, that student. Each and every one of them, they might either return the actual result in an object, or it might say, hey, I couldn't find that object for you. So instead of making 3 different requests and bombarding the API, send one request with as many requests as you can, and it's going to return back a list with the status for each and every one. This is super powerful when it comes to, a kind of fanning out and sending multiple requests to an API endpoint and then gathering all of that back. Amazing capability that OData, and all you have to do is just go say app.use OData batching. Boom, done. You're in there.
Yep. So batching is built into the GraphQL.
It's already there. Nice.
Yeah, so it's there. And the other thing that GraphQL might have that OData I don't believe has is subscriptions, which are real time.
I see.
As well as the whole directive thing with deferring. There's the thing where you can say, okay, I want to get back this document, but this specific attribute in there, because I know that it might take a longer time to fetch it. Maybe send it back to me when you can. So then you get your results in more than one response. Exactly. That's the defer directive. There's other examples of things which I think I haven't seen in OData, but anyway, it's super interesting to compare a little bit.
Absolutely. So anyway, I mean, Graph versus OData, I will kind of find time to basically implement both on an API and run. If you guys have heard of .NET benchmark, I will run benchmark, see what performance look like. How the ease of use. There's so many different aspects that you want to kind of be aware of. The one thing that gives OData a little bit of a a leg up over GraphQL is that it's already a specification that's implemented across almost a lot of enterprise applications, a lot of services out there. So you may or may not find an enterprise service that you want to integrate with that knows about GraphQL, versus you're almost more likely to find OData implemented already in that service. So is that coming into the market first and being available first and all that. That's also one thing that needs to be considered. I'll find time to make a really detailed, down to the last bit kind of comparisons between the two, and maybe ORDS while we're at it. But that's as much as I have right now. And I see that there's also the article about GraphQL is not OData. I also saw that one. It's a very interesting article. Please go ahead and take a look at it. Anyway, they are similar in some things and they are not in other things. And it all depends on what makes sense to you and what's easier for your team to work with, right? So you have a lot of applications out there, SharePoint, Xbox. Inside Microsoft, almost every other service that is publicly available, including Cosmos DB, outside the box will give you OData for free. And just very recently, I learned that Blob Storage now is giving you OData outside of the box, which is really great. So you have all of these capabilities are available, but also it's also worth the investigation, worth to put something proper out there to say, here's the comparison, here's the state of things out there. Mm-hmm.
And what's great is on this stand-up, we accept people from all walks, right? So we brought the GraphQL people on. There's a community stand-up with Michael, who runs Hot Chocolate. So anyone interested in comparisons, go take a look at that session, take a look at this session, and you can make some comparisons and draw some conclusions for yourself.
Absolutely.
So we are definitely going to get you on the schedule to come back and answer questions.
Oh, man.
The community is definitely saying more OData with an A, right? MOAR. So we'll do that.
To come back? Okay.
Thank you so much for your time.
I had so much
We'll
fun
be
with you guys.
nicer to
Thank
you
you all.
next
I
time.
appreciate you
I
all.
promise.
I appreciate you all. Thank you for the opportunity. This is amazing. Hanging out with engineers and talking tech is literally an addiction to me. And at any point in time, whenever you guys are available, whenever our schedules, are in a good place, I'm more than happy to come back again and answer as much questions as possible. Thank you again.
Awesome.
Thank you so very
I'm
much.
looking forward to it. Yeah, thank you. It's been great. So
Awesome.
I think with that, we will say goodbye for now and see you next time on the next one of these. Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
guys. Take care. Bye.